All right, good afternoon. First, we want to thank you all for coming here to attend our presentation. I know it's been a long day, so thank you again. We are Team Lambda 1, and we would like to present to you a new paradigm for the treatment of implant infections. So we believe that the greatest business ideas are the ones that solve difficult problems in the world in an innovative way. So in 2020, we have a problem to fix. The number of orthopedic implants is increasing and rising at a rapid rate. These implants can often be infected, and treatment for these implant infections are costly and significant. The orthopedic implant market is a market with a rising cost. Just in knee implants alone are increasing at a rate of 337% by 2025, totaling to 4 million new procedures and costing patients $1.6 billion annually. In addition, there's a 16% recurrent infection rate for these surgical implants. So that's our client, Solenic Medical, has a solution. It's a non-invasive medical device which has a safety assurance and clinical trial success.
Thank you. So I'm going to describe the problem a little bit more in depth. For orthopedic implants, just like with any surgery, there are risks of infections. And particularly, this is a biofilm infection, which adheres to the surface, and antibiotics and IV treatments are no longer applicable. So they physically have to cut into the knee, tear apart muscles, tendons, and ligaments, and drill into the bone to place another implant in. This is costly. And it's also risky, because the average age of the patient is going to be in their 60s, 70s, or even 80s. So it's traumatic. So I have the device actually here today, and I think it will show it a little bit better. This device will go around a joint. You can put your hand and arm in it, and it allows you to use alternating magnetic fields to pinpoint heat just towards the device. The surrounding tissue remains intact. No cutting, no risk, no problems. And you're left with an implant that is okay. The metal has been heated, the bacteria have been killed off. And so this is the device. It shows the coils here. And this is what the prototype looks like. They also have, in terms of safety, they have the hydrophone, which is so sensitive, it can even hear one cell burst. And finally, an artist's depiction. It's mobile, it's easy, and it's accessible to the patient.
So when our team first met with Solenic's CEO, he posed the following question to us. What market/strategy should Solenic pursue moving forward? So the bulk of our presentation is really answering this question. And this is where we come in. This is basically figuring out what's the target market and what's the strategy they should use moving forward to be successful. So we looked at Solenic's two patented technologies. The alternating magnetic frequency technology, which is the coil, and then the hydrophone, which of course we don't have a little prop to that, but you get the picture. We looked at the different markets specifically. So there's the medical application, specific orthopedics, which is what Solenic had intended this product to be focused on. You have knees, hips, shoulders, and other orthopedic joints. As well as we looked at other markets outside of this, such as the energy industry, oil and gas, as well as just other industries. And then finally, we looked at the strategy that Solenic can do. We identified 3 key strategies they can go. Manufacturing in-house, they actually develop it, they build it themselves, and they sell directly to hospitals. Licensing, where they actually license out the technology to medical manufacturers such as Stryker and Johnson & Johnson. And then finally, the last strategy, just sell off and divest the company, cut their losses, and move on to the next thing. So, in order to figure out what market Solenic should go, the value we wanted to bring is by doing a top-down market analysis. And we did this for each market. And by far, the largest market we found was the medical knee implant market. And here's why. 4.7 million people in the United States have an orthopedic knee implant right now. This number is expected to grow by 337% by 2025. And this is mainly due to the elder population that's increasing in the United States. In addition, that means in 2025, there will be 15.8 million people in the United States with an orthopedic knee implant. That's a big market. Now, 1 to 2% of all orthopedic knee implants have an infection rate, which means that roughly in 2025, there'll be 158,000 to 316,000 Americans with an orthopedic knee implant-related infection. Which then means, of Solenic, we specifically target biofilm, so 65% of all these infections are biofilm-related, which means Solenic's target market comes down to, in 2025, 102,000 to 306,000 patients, and that's just within the orthopedic knee market. Now, that was the biggest market that we found from our top-down market analysis. So going back to the CEO's original question, what market and strategy should we look at? We're recommending using their patented technologies to focus on the orthopedic knee market, because that's where the biggest market's going to be, at least right now in the next 5 years. And strategy-wise, we evaluated the 3 different strategies, and we're recommending manufacturing in-house. And this is mainly because in the medical device market, you need to develop clout and a brand to be able to be successful. Think of an ultrasound, for example. Solenic needs to really has to focus on building their brand out. Licensing just doesn't make sense at this point because they need to be seen as the standard of care for a company like Stryker and Johnson & Johnson to even think about investing or licensing that technology. And selling the company doesn't make sense either because their executive board has a plethora of experience working in the medical field and as well as just in the venture capital field. So we wouldn't want that to go to waste. So right now, basically answering the CEO's question and giving him a solution, we're recommending focusing on orthopedic needs as well as focusing on manufacturing in-house and selling directly to hospitals. So all this is great, but let's talk about the financials next.
Yeah, so now that we know that the company should focus on the orthopedic knee industry, we wanted to further add value by helping them understand how much this market is actually worth to them. So there's basically two main revenue drivers for them, and that's the sale of the actual machines and then how much they charge per procedure. So right now, a typical revision surgery that would treat this biofilm typically costs around $100,000. It's very pricey. The machine only costs $10,000 to make, so they have a lot of leeway as far as how they can price this and still make money off of it. The second thing is for the procedure itself, how much can they make? So right now, there's no reimbursement code in the insurance market for this because it's a new procedure, but they estimate that they'll receive about $2,500 from the insurance per procedure. Now, it typically costs them about $1,000, from their perspective per procedure. So they have about a $1,500 margin right there as well. So what we did is we basically we took their financials and we added some assumptions to help them figure out how much this will be worth in 5 years. And what we determined was that by the end of year 5, they can be doing almost 400 procedures that year. Now again, this is on the very low end of their market. Like we said, their market is around $100,000 on the low end. So this is less than 0.5%. This is assuming very little market penetration. Now, if we do that, by the end of year 5, we're looking at a net income for year 5 of about $2.8 million. So now we also wanted to add value to the company by helping them understand how much they will be worth if they reach that $2.8 million. So what we did is we looked at medical device companies in the stock market, and we determined that, or we realized actually that most medical device companies in the stock market have a relatively high price to earnings ratio of right around 30. And so again, we're trying to be conservative here, so we used 6. Now, this is again on the low end, and using that $2.8 million net income by the end of year 5, a price to earnings ratio of 6, and then a required rate of return of 30%, in 5 years the company can be worth $4.6 million. Again, this is the low end. Now imagine what a company like this could be like with a sales force like Johnson & Johnson. That could be worth a lot more down the road. So let's talk about what the company needs to focus on in the short term and in the long term. So in the short term, the company really needs to focus on clearing the clinical trials and the FDA approval process. This is a long, lengthy process, but we do feel like the company is well poised to do this because of their connections with VIC, which is, I don't know if we mentioned, but they're a part of a venture capital portfolio. And the portfolio they're a part of has considerable resources as far as maneuvering the FDA waters and stuff like that. So as soon as they clear those hurdles and they can actually get to market, they need to start thinking long-term and establishing manufacturing relationships. So this includes establishing relationships up and down the supply chain, and then with manufacturers themselves. And then as we discussed, this process is lengthy for receiving market approval from the FDA and the testing for joints, as we're learning with knees right now. So as soon as they're able to afford it, they should start looking ahead to other joints, such as hips, shoulders, and elbows. And then the company should also remain open to being acquired down the road. Like we said, we see a very conservative estimate of them being worth $4.6 million, and that could really grow as the company sells more machines and is able to penetrate the market more with more procedures. So at this time, we would like to thank you and open the floor for questions.
Why a 6x PE instead of a 30x if the standard is 30?
Well, we basically looked at, right now, it's a new company. They have, you look at a sales force, let's say like Johnson & Johnson maybe has 2,000 sales reps. They don't have any right now. So we took it way down. We were trying to be ultra conservative. Also, Boston Scientific, that was the lowest of the medical companies we looked at, and theirs was 12, so we cut it in half. But long story short, we were basically just trying to be super conservative with our estimate.
Quick question to understand the market. You guys are recommending to rent the unit, to sell the unit?
They'll develop the unit and then sell it directly to hospitals.
To hospitals, okay. So they need to sell 400 is your estimate to value 4 million?
Yes.
Yeah, which we think again that's a very small sliver of their available market.
Do you know how many of those, I hear your cost, there is $10,000 for whatever that your antibiotics or whatever, but do you know how many people see a normal hospital per year?
I
And
think
those
that
kind of
was-
infections and stuff? That basically they can base their decision in buying the unit or not.
So right now, the amount they're going, at least in today's year, for this particular type of infection, just looking at knees, is roughly around 50,000. But just based off the projections that we've done through our research, like we mentioned, we gave a range. The lowest it'll be in 2025 will be 100,000, highest would be about 200,000, and that's just for knees. And assuming that we can clear the FDA process for them in the other areas, they can also tackle other areas instead of just knees. They can do hips, shoulders, joints. So it increases the margin. And because it's a cylindrical coil, it doesn't take too much to actually alter the coil to be bigger for hips. And that size, you can use it for knee. You can also same coil, use it for elbows. So there's a lot of wiggle room that they can use for attracting more large size of the market. Just really, what's the hurdle they need to jump over specifically is just the FDA process, because each joint is its own separate FDA process.
Sure, but you're talking about the industry as a whole, and people won't buy them based on the industry. It's like how many people are showing up in my hospital that need this?
That's more or less the question. I mean, you're telling me that they need to sell 400. How many does represent for a hospital? And how many patients?
Unfortunately, we've got to stop there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.